Welcome to episode 73 of Hello Church. I'm Wade Bearden.
And I'm Justin Trapp, and today we're going to be talking about how to turn a sermon series into a book. But first,
yes,
if you're a regular listener of Hello Church or you watch on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe to our channels, or not to our channels, to the podcast.
Yeah, to the podcast. Well, on YouTube, it's a YouTube channel.
Yeah, true.
Ring that bell, smash that subscribe button.
Turn on the notification. How many adjectives can we...
It's like when we post a new episode, you should get a text, an email, a notification.
Smoke signal.
Yeah, the alarm, your smoke alarm in your house should go off if you're doing it right. So make sure that happens. We're excited to talk about this. I'm really pumped, Justin, because I think everybody has a good book in them. And I think pastors especially have a lot that they have researched from God's Word, that they've prayed about, that they've thought about, that could be turned into a book. And so we're going to talk about turning your sermon series into a book. And the first thing is why. And I think naturally people kind of understand this, but let's give you, our listeners, just a couple of reasons why we think you should. And I think there are a lot of fun options, a lot of fun things you can do with the book. I visited a church a little while back, and the pastor had written a book that shared a little bit about his life, the life of the church. I think he worked through a book of the Bible in it, and it was a really great thing to give away. So everybody who was new got that book, and it gave them an opportunity to share or to learn a little bit more about the congregation. So it was a really cool little gift, because most of the time, right, we give away what, like a coffee mug.
Terrible gifts.
Yeah, we give away things that aren't great.
A church T-shirt. Like, we assume that a first-time guest wants to like proudly wear the church T-shirt.
Rep us.
Yeah,
a little bumper sticker. This was a great way to say, hey, here's a little bit about me. Here's a little bit about our church. Here's what we believe. I thought it was a cool idea.
Well, and to be honest, I've heard criticisms of pastors that release books, and it's like, they're just doing this because they're trying to build their personal brand, or they can't, it's like an egotistical thing. And gosh, while I can't speak to the motives of every pastor out there that releases a book, I can tell you that I see tangible benefits from releasing a book. And you alluded to this, right? So if a person, let's just back up a little bit, like zoom out. If someone comes to your church and they visit for the first time, and you're preaching, this is the first time they've ever heard you preach. It could be any one of your sermons, right? How many times will it take for them to sit in a service, sit in one of your sermons, and learn about your story, the ups and downs that you've had in your faith, the church's story, how it began? Like, how long will it take? Unless they're just some like investigative reporter, right? Looking through old Facebook posts and maybe archive pages on your website, it might take a while. However, if someone comes to your church and they're a first-time guest, and you give them a book on a series that you just really resonated with your congregation and perhaps even the community around you, you give them a book, and you're able to weave the church's history into that book, into that story, your own personal story. Maybe it's a book that you did a series on marriage, and so you share the story of how you and your spouse met, and sort of the ups and downs in that, and when you welcome your first child. Like, they can read that book in a weekend and fast forward perhaps years of waiting or learning about the church's history and all of that. Like, I think someone, even the most diligent and involved person, it's going to take a while for them to truly learn and trust, right? You as a communicator, but also learn about the history of the church. And they can literally just absorb this in a weekend if they are able to read a book that you've released. And so I think that's one of the most powerful reasons why every church, every pastor should release a book and give it to at least first-time guests, but I think you should give it to your whole congregation.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. You could even use it as a digital resource on your website for people who haven't had a chance to even visit. I think would be great. And then another reason too is you put a lot of work into preaching. You put, I don't know, some people put 10 hours or more.
Every sermon.
Every single sermon. And why not kind of take that and maybe harness it so that what God is doing in your study time reaches more people? Because if you think about it, Justin, how many people at our churches actually go back a year or 2 years and listen to our sermons? Some people do, but for most of us, you might get a couple of listens every single month for sermons that are, a year or 2 years old. But with a book, you can kind of keep that rolling and I think maximize what you've put into it, and it could be helpful for more people.
Well, another thing, a book is also, this isn't even in our show notes, but, let's say you do a book on forgiveness and you have a powerful story in your own life of forgiveness, and you taught a series on forgiveness. You can easily, if someone says, hey, I need a guest speaker, or maybe you are wanting to speak but be away from your church, allow another speaker at your church to do a series, you can say, hey, I have a book on forgiveness. It's just like really easy material to select from and go to a church, and not only can you preach on that topic, but then you can sell the books too while you're there. So I think it's super, super beneficial. And when you're doing this, though, let's move into choosing the topic, or choosing the sermon series in which that we're going to make into a book.
Yeah. So we'll give you some reasons why. So how do you do it? The first thing is choosing an actual sermon series, and this goes past just what sermon series did I really like? From the past few months. And you need to think deeper than that. So think about what you want the audience to be. So we have different types of sermon series. So you have maybe a pastoral sermon series that talks about or that addresses the people in your church, maybe an evangelistic sermon series, maybe a sermon series on marriage, a sermon series on giving. Think about who you want that target audience to be. Is this primarily for people who are visiting your church? Is it primarily for people in your church, other Christians? And then choose a sermon series based on that. And that way, you're going to hit your target audience. So, for instance, if you want this to be a book you can give to visitors, it's probably not going to be adapted from a sermon series that's about serving in the local church, because that's more for insiders.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind as you think through a sermon series that you're going to adapt.
And one of the things that they teach, and this isn't like unique to Hello Church, but this is pretty common, is that when you're writing a book, you want to write to very specific types of people.
Yeah.
So in your mind, think, I want to write to the 35-year-old male who has this type of job and has 2 kids, is married with 2 kids. Usually that person exists in your church. So identify a few different types of people that you're writing to. Identify who that person is in your church, because they represent a lot of people, right? In your church and in your community. And then go get a little feedback from them. Say, hey, I'm working on a book about XYZ topic, or from a series that we just went through. What do you think about this? And get a little feedback and see what they say. Because a lot of times our ideas about what we think is interesting might not be as interesting or compelling to somebody else, or they may say something that sparks an idea for you that you thought, you know what, I hadn't thought about that approach or that specifically, and that might actually be better than what the original angle of the sermon series. Maybe it's the same content matter, but a different angle. So, you want to identify the people that you're writing to, and then go get feedback from them.
Yeah, I think it's super helpful, because then you can kind of nail down, okay, I'm going to work through this sermon series. Then the next thing is transcribe your messages. I encourage you not to do this yourself.
Yeah.
Just put a little money into it. Maybe pay an intern. You can also go to rev.com, which is really great. Now, when you transcribe those, they're not going to be ready to publish.
No.
They're going to give you kind of a foundation, but getting those on paper is going to be super helpful. And then what you can do from there is identify kind of where things are going. You usually have kind of a big idea for the series, like here's what my thesis statement for the series is, and essentially that would become the thesis statement for your book. Now, Do you need to add more chapters? That would be the next step. Do I need to add an introduction, a conclusion? Is this a 6-week sermon series, but I need to address one more topic? Figure that out. Your book doesn't have to be long. In fact, even if it is a little bit shorter, it just makes it easier for people to read in a couple of sittings. Yep. So get it transcribed, and then before you start messing with it, think through what other additional chapters you need to put together. That's super important. And then, Justin, you've got to begin to edit it.
Yeah, you wanna determine the book style and the purpose. You get comfortable with your writing style. Are you wanting to inspire? Are you wanting to instruct? Are you wanting to be the hero of this story? Are you wanting the audience to be the hero? Is there another hero if you're borrowing from Donald Miller's story brand framework? And then, you can edit yourself. I wouldn't do that. I would strongly encourage you to work with an editor, or there are actually sermon to book services out there. I think sermontobook.com is one of them. We're not related to them, unaffiliated, but I've heard great things. And you can partner with them, and they have a whole editorial team that will take your sermon series, walk through that process. I think Lucid Books is another one with Casey Cease and his team. Casey was a pastor and started a publishing company on the side. So, he's bivocational now. And so, there are different services out there that can help you. You're not sort of, in the cave writing, editing, publishing all yourself. There is a little help. Just depends on how fast you want to get this done and the resources that you have available to do it.
Yeah. And then the next step would be to brainstorm a title. Now, it's possible that, and even most likely, that your sermon series title is going to be the title of your book. But think through that. Show that to certain individuals. Create a mock-up. Take your sermon series graphic and maybe just address it and put it in with the book cover and give it to people and say, hey, what do you think about this? So then it allows you to think through, okay, should I tweak the subtitle, the title? Should I change the graphic a bit? Usually, when you think of on-screen graphics, those are a little bit busier than book graphics. Usually book cover graphics are simpler. So keep that in mind as you convert your series to a book.
Yeah, and then, you're going to want to have people that you trust, right? I wouldn't just give a spare copy out, first draft copy out to everybody. A few people, a select people that you trust that are detailed, that can give you critical, constructive feedback, maybe authors, people that have written books, maybe they've edited books, whatever the case may be. Get that feedback and utilize, because that's your first draft is going to be really rough and really messy, and then you're going to edit it, go through the editing process, you're going to get some feedback, and then that's where you really refine the book and it really comes out with some nice polish to it. Wade, you've written, how many books have you written? 3 books now?
So I've done a couple of small ebooks, but written one full-length book, and then I'm just finishing up a second one now. And yeah, like you said, getting feedback. So on this book that I'm finishing up right now, I sent it to a couple of people, and it was pretty unanimous. It was like, hey, we need some more stories. We need some more like skin in this. And it was really cool to see a lot of people say that. And so that's what I did. I went back and changed it and tweaked it and then sent it to an editor. So that feedback is really important. And what I would encourage you to do is it's good. Like if you're talking about theology, get theology experts to read through to make sure they are understanding what you're saying and you're saying it correctly. But then, and one of the things that I did is give your book to that target audience. So if you're writing a book to the people in your congregation, don't just send it to pastors. Send it to people in your congregation or people like the individuals in your congregation. And that's going to give you the best feedback, I think. People are going to say, hey, I don't quite understand this. I don't get this. I've never heard this theological term before, so you need to explain it. I think that's really huge. And then basically from there, You can do a couple things. There are a lot of ways to print the book. You can do it through Amazon. Amazon has a really easy way to walk through the publishing of your book. They can turn it into a Kindle a book. They can print it for you. You can hire an interior designer or do it yourself. I've always hired for mine because they make the inside actually look like a real book. Sometimes you open up these books that are self-published and they look self-published.
You can tell,
You can tell. But if you get the right person to do it, it makes all the difference. Here's another tip. If you print your book, there'll be a couple options for paper. There'll be white, and then there'll be like this off-white, like the yellowish. Choose the off-white yellow. It's like cream. Because if you open up books, that's what all the books use. Yeah. Unless they're using this like thick, more glossy paper, and usually that's more expensive. That's for like textbooks. But if you're using like
the white paper feels cheaper too.
It just does.
Than the yellow paper. And you wouldn't think that.
No, but that's just the way it's what we're used to.
Yeah.
We come from parchment, and it just kind of sticks. So just a couple of tips. If you've published a book before and you're a pastor, link to it or tell us about it.
Would love to know how it's gone.
Yeah, either in the YouTube comments. You can also hashtag Hello Church Pod on Twitter, or you can follow us on Hello Church Pod on Instagram. Let us know any tips that you would have. We would love to hear that. I'm actually getting ready to record the audiobook for my book here in the next month or so. So if you've recorded an audiobook, I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
We get to hear your sultry voice in that.
Yeah, get to hear the voice. And so, but if you've done that before, make sure to let people know and what's the best process. I'm sure it'd be super helpful for individuals.
Yeah. So again, we're big fans of taking your sermon series and converting it to a book. We've listed out the benefits. I think it's a powerful way to build trust and to share the story of what God is doing at your church and what God has done in your own life personally. People love seeing what God has done. They love stories. They love hearing about your story and the church's story. And so I think that's important. And a lot of times we're not intentional enough about sharing that stuff. We just get into a series, we go through our sermon calendar, and we just forget to, like, we just feel like, oh, I've shared that story, right? I've already told that twice now since I've been at this church. And there's so many people who just would benefit from that. And so again, a book is going to be that tool that you can use to just share what God has done. And that's a powerful thing, right? To see where you've come from, and to really see, for you to communicate where the church is headed. So
I knew a pastor once who had in his younger days had gone to jail, and he became a Christian. And
it's like are you talking about like the cross and the switchblade or something?
No, it's like another story. But every few months he would maybe mention that, and people would be like, the new people would be like, "What? Wait, what? Time out!" Like, he's like, "Yeah, whenever I was in jail or when I was in prison, they're just like, what?" And so a book would be really great to, like you said, to help people kind of get to know someone almost immediately, and to hear their story and just kind of facilitate that powerful moment.
The pastor from Cell Block C.
Yeah, I mean,
there it is. That's your title, Pastor. Hey, we always enjoy our time with you. Hopefully you found this beneficial. If you do find this beneficial and helpful, and you've watched or listened to the podcast often, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notifications. That lets you know when we drop a new episode. And we've had a great little run. Episode 73 is now in the books. We are 3/4 of the way almost to 100 episodes. Yeah, so make sure to follow us on Facebook or follow us on YouTube. Also, we have an Instagram, Hello Church Pod. So at Hello Church Pod. What sermon calendar are you excited about? What sermon series coming up are you pumped about, perhaps, to adapt for your next book? Let us know that as well. And our next episode, we're going to be talking about Sermonary, an organization that we founded, and our Sermonary 2.0 launch. So we're launching something very special. We're going to discuss that next time on Hello Church. Yep, we'll see you.